Good morning. It is Monday today, and welcome to Red Coffee. I started the channel a few days ago. I uploaded a video with my initial concept of what I was going to do and a few news from around the world. Since then, I posted it on Reddit, on a few subreddits, and I got a lot of suggestions. I want to thank everybody that participated in those threads, and it was honestly really helpful. So I will be probably doing more videos relating to the things that people asked about. Today we're going to talk about sectarianism. We're going to talk about sectarianism because after posting the first video on those threads, and the first video wasn't very specifically Marxist-Leninist. The content was, I would say, pretty much just generally leftist. And a lot of people were very dismissive because I was a Marxist-Leninist. Not that I mind, but I just thought it was an interesting place to start, especially since it was something that also was suggested that I do a video about. So sectarianism, basically what it is what makes the left be divided. What do I mean by this? So as you may know, there are a lot of tendencies on the left, and a lot of these tendencies don't really get along with each other. And I think it's interesting because we are getting at a point with how media works where everyone is victim of this sectarianism. And of course, the sectarianism that's always been part of the left has become more visible. So let's talk about specifically the differences between Leninists and anarchists. I'm only going to do a slight overview of the issues that they disagree on the most. So firstly, we have the question of the state. Leninists are kind of Marxists that think that after the revolution, there has to be a state, and the state needs to be controlled by the proletarians, the working people. Anarchists generally think that after the revolution, the people should have power directly, and there shouldn't be a state apparatus in socialism, because if you successfully pull off a revolution and you change the way things are produced, which is, transitioning to socialism, then you won't need a state. The people can handle it themselves. This is something anarchists and Leninists fight about constantly on the internet. And it's really kind of annoying because we are nowhere near the implementation of a socialist state right now. We are nowhere near the starting of a global or local revolution, a socialist revolution in any form, really, and at least in the West. And it seems kind of a waste of time to me. And I think it has to do a lot with just wanting to be right and wanting to be better or more respected than the person you're debating or the person you're talking about these issues with. And honestly, a lot of people don't really know that much about the state, and they don't really know that much about what Marxism says about the state. A lot of anarchists aren't Marxists, and that's okay. But so in a sense, there's this problem of not speaking the same language, and particularly, I think it's just such a useless debate right now. I think it's more interesting to talk about ways of organizing and ways of preparing the working masses for the revolution, which is the next thing that anarchists and Leninists disagree about. So when you're preparing to start the revolution, you got to think about how complicated that is. So we're talking about all of the state apparatuses, all of the police, the military, everyone is going to be against you, as well as a lot of the population will be against you as well if you try to start a revolution. So obviously you got to get people on your side. you want to convince people that a socialist revolution, is the way to go. Now, there are different ways to do this, but as far as propaganda and educating the masses, I feel like anarchists and communists and Marxists and Leninists, we all kind of have the same purpose. We all have the same objective. So maybe Leninists will focus more on the class struggle and on conflicts and working environments, and maybe anarchists will focus more on community stuff and making sure people understand through praxis that socialists are on their side and they want to better their communities and better everyone's life. I'm not saying these are legitimate characterizations. These are just examples, just a small disclaimer about that. I'm not going to be using actual real world practices for this because the video would be way too long. Now, I don't think these are necessarily exclusive to each one. This is just a generalization. And I also want to say that at this point, when talking about propaganda and ways of reaching the masses and helping them know about socialism and why revolution is the only way out of capitalism, there doesn't seem to be much that anarchists and Leninists should disagree about at this point, but they do. So why do we leftists, communists, socialists of all stripes don't collaborate essentially on making good, accessible propaganda for everyone? This takes us to another disagreement between anarchists and Leninists, particularly, which is how to bring about the revolution. So, for Leninists, I don't really know that much about anarchists, but for Leninists, the building of a revolutionary party is very important. This party, Leninists call it the Vanguard Party. And this is not like your ordinary kind of political party. This is a party that is more of an organization that's dedicated to bringing about a revolution by the masses. Anarchists, as far as I can tell, prefer a more community-based intervention on society and on the masses by supporting and leading spontaneous movements by the masses. So, for example, if there's a social problem in a neighborhood where the water is contaminated, then what anarchists think is the way to go is to, and also this is something they have in common with Maoists in a sense. What they think the best way to move forward and to spread socialism and organize the masses is to prove to them that anarchists can solve this problem and that collaboration and social intervention is the way to go to fix these kinds of problems. That's not something that Leninists are against in any way, shape, or form. Leninists think that these kinds of interventions are vital, and the spontaneity of the masses when it comes to political struggle is very important. But it's not the end-all be-all for Leninists. The Vanguard Party, which we just talked about, needs to be an organization that's prepared to take power from the capitalists. And we don't think that they're going to give it up easily. And particularly, we don't think that once we take power, they will stop trying to undermine the revolution and undermine socialism. So you need state apparatus. You need a state apparatus leaded by the vanguard party, which doesn't mean that the vanguard party is in charge of every decision. It's just the leader. And you need this to repress the counter-revolutionaries, the reactionaries, the capitalists that will undoubtedly try to seize power back from the revolutionaries. So there are definitely some difference between anarchists, Leninists, even Maoists, or any other leftist tendency. If there weren't theoretical disagreements between the different leftist tendencies, there wouldn't be different leftist tendencies. I think it's really important to go back to the concept of sectarianism and what it's rooted in. Now that we've seen a few differences between the old feuding parties of anarchists and Leninists. So sectarianism is based on something that's particularly anti-leftist and extremely petty in a way. Sectarianism emanates from some differences, from some theoretical differences. I myself don't think we're at a point where these differences are particularly relevant. Not to say that they aren't there or that they're not important. I think at this point in time, this point in history, they're not. But what makes sectarianism interesting is how it operates. So sectarianism really just means that I think my ideology, my way of bringing about the revolution, my way of running a worker state is better than your way. And even if you believe this vehemently, there is a problem with that. And what that ends up doing is making me or you feel like I'm superior to the other person, superior in my conclusions and superior in my thinking about socialism and the revolution. And superiority, or this kind of natural complex of like, I am better than you, my tribe is better than you, it's kind of really bad to have in the left, where we're trying to build a more egalitarian society, a society that brings about better opportunities for everyone, and no matter how smart or how well read you are, how well educated, or how much money you have in the bank, what we want is that all humans be liberated from exploitation. And it doesn't matter where they come from, what they think, etc. It's really important to think about this when you feel like you have some sectarian tendencies, or that an organization you participate in has sectarian tendencies, because basically what is happening is this is capitalist thought, this is competition, this is unequal access to education operating, and what you're saying is I'm better than you because I had better access to all this theory, or I have read different books than you, or I come from a different viewpoint on life, and I am right, you are wrong, I am better than you, accept it. So the second way in which sectarianism, I think, is pretty bad, sectarianism is defined by being something that happens within a group. So within a group, we could be talking about the communists, the leftists, whatever you want to call them. So you can't be sectarian towards a fascist. That's not how it works. Sectarianism is something that operates only between groups that have common interests, or that have objectives in common. So what you're really doing when you are reinforcing sectarianism by just really not doing anything of worth to society or to the revolution, by calling people names, by just really being ignorant of the realities of political organizing and of revolutionary practice, you are simply doing the capitalists' dirty work for them. You are making sure that people don't develop their political thoughts, that they stay caged in the same political ideas, that they don't and will never listen to a different viewpoint on something like how to create a worker state. And you're really just making it impossible for the vast masses to understand why they should join the socialist camp, why they should join the revolution, why they should put their lives on the line for a bunch of people that are just bickering constantly on the internet. As far as the solution for sectarianism, I really think there is only one, and that is you have to organize in real life. It doesn't matter whether you're an anarchist, a Leninist, a Maoist, whatever. You just have to find an organization, start working, start fighting the battles that the masses need you to fight. And after a while, you will realize that most organizations are really against this kind of sectarianism. There's of course always like organizations that are really bad and they give a bad name to the left, and those organizations do deserve to be called out. But in general, you will find that most political parties, most communist organizations, most anarchist groups, they don't participate in this kind of bickering in real life because there's simply bigger problems to solve. There's simply bigger fights. And once you get offline, once you start working in the real world with real problems, seeing people suffering, and you start to see how it really makes a difference for communists to organize, for communists to don't act like children on the internet and fight about dumb shit all the time, you will see that you'll be participating in political spaces with people you never thought you'd participate with in a political space, and seeing that there's really not much of an issue there. You have the same common goals. You just want things to get better, and you want to fight the fight. You want to win the battles, and you'll get there when you get there with the political arguments. And usually, if there are political arguments, they happen in a much more organized and adult fashion that we're used to here on the internet. Well, thank you very much for listening. I don't really have a script for today's episode. I was kind of just spitballing. As I said in the beginning of the video, I have some more ideas on videos thanks to posting my first video on Reddit and asking for suggestions. I will continue to make these. I think this is really fun. I like to put my thoughts out there, and I hope I can help anyone who listens to this to understand a bit more why the left is always bickering about these issues, but it doesn't really matter. Hope you enjoyed this freshly brewed red coffee, and I will see you in a few days. Have a great day.